Hey everyone, so today we're going to continue with the second part of our three-part videos on the social cognitive theory. So just to review a little bit, again, social cognitive theory is the theory that behavior is modeled by other members of a group and acquired through observation or imitation based on the consequences of a behavior, right? And consequences in this sense could either be good or bad. Sometimes, if it's positive consequences, you're going to, you know, continue doing it. So we talked about conformity and compliance, and again, conformity is when you follow norms, rules, and values without direct pressure, and then compliance is when you do follow those with direct pressure. As far as today goes, we are going to be talking about the social learning theory. And so this is part, again, of the social cognitive theory, and it explains that the individual acquires behavior patterns through observing, imitating, and modeling the behaviors of others. And so, again, this involves observation, which may lead to imitation if the behavior observed appears to lead to reward. And so our interactions with other people really affect the way in which we behave. When our learning takes place in a social environment, the learner pays attention to the model, remembers the behavior that was observed, and then replicates the action. And usually we do feel good in terms of demonstrating what has been learned, right? Even think back to when you're younger. Throwing a ball, maybe your mom or your dad are modeling that for you, or a cousin, uncle, aunt, whatever. And your ability to replicate that action is known as vicarious learning, but it's also something that makes you feel good about doing it. Demonstrating learned behaviors also gains the approval of others as the results of your copying the behavior gets better. So let's say you are a skier. As you get better at skiing, the encouraging looks and positive attention you get make you more likely to continue that behavior. So in terms of social learning theory and who can be a model to us, even those we haven't met can become models. Celebrities, actors, thinkers, scientists, doctors, whoever can become models for us. And so I'm going to use the example of a man named Roger Bannister and the 4-minute mile. Roger Bannister was the first person ever on Earth to run under 4 minutes for a mile. And before he did that in 1954, many thought that it just was impossible, that human nature could not do it. And he became the first. And within months of him doing this, several had already broken his record by copying his model. And so they used him as a model to imitate his behavior. They observed what he did and completed it. And there's several different types of models. So the first one are positional models, people we see but do not interact with directly. So like Roger Bannister. And then personal models, people with whom we are in frequent contact. And so these people are more likely to be sources of long-term development of our social behaviors. So we're going to talk first about a study that deals directly with this from Bandura in 1961. This is called the Bobo doll experiment. I'm going to have you guys watch this video because I think it gives a good visual of what's going on in the study within the slide version of this PowerPoint. But the aim of Bandura in 1961 was to demonstrate that learning can occur through mere observation of a model and that imitation can take place in the absence of a model. And so in this case, aggression was used to be learned through observation and imitation. So in the study, they had 36 boys and 36 girls from ages 3 to 6. And they had 3 different groups. The first one observed adult models who showed aggression by bashing the inflated Bobo doll. And again, the Bobo doll if you did not see the video, just sort of goes down when you hit it and comes back up. Group 2 observed a non-aggressive adult who assembled toys for 10 minutes, and Group 3 was the control. They did not see any model. And then Groups 1 and 2, some saw same-sex models, others saw opposite-sex models. And so after viewing the models, all groups were put in a room full of toys. And then the toys were taken away a couple minutes later. And if you can think about being a kid, taking away someone's toys is a big deal. And they were told that these were for other children. And this was trying to put them in an aggressive state of mind. And the only toy they were given was the Bobo doll. So the results showed that those exposed to aggression at the earliest stage showed significantly more aggression towards the Bobo doll than children not exposed to aggression. Boys were more likely to imitate the physical aggression they had seen from men, and girls were more likely to imitate verbal aggression they had seen from women. So the conclusion was that aggression is learned, and it's not necessarily part of our nature, but it also backs up the social learning theory. We often learn most from those that are like us in some way. Not saying that we can't learn from people who don't look like us. So strengths, the study appears to support social learning theory, and so we copy the behavior learned from others. And it also has high ecological validity. It can be easily applicable to real-life situations. But there are a few limitations. The first one, children may not have related beating the doll to aggression. If they had been beating, someone up, I don't know that the children do the same thing. Maybe they do, though. And then also frustration could have set in regardless of seeing aggression due to the toys being taken away, which led them to greater aggression. Now, building off of Bandura 1961 is Slaby and Frey 1975, and they were much more concerned with studying this idea of how who children look at as models. And building off of the idea of Bandura, where a lot of the children were more likely to follow models that look like them, the aim was to investigate the role of gender constancy in the attention given to same-sex models. So they took 55 children, ages 2 to 5, correlation study. They assessed their gender constancy before in an interview, and then they were shown a film where a male and a female model were on the screen on separate sides of the screen, and so you could more easily see who the children were looking at and who they were fixating their eyes on. So the results were that children with higher levels of gender constancy in the pre-test before showed more selective attention to same-sex role models. Boys that were low on gender constancy looked at the male model about half the time, and then high on gender constancy about 3/5 of the time. So the opposite was true for girls, where they looked more at the girls than the guys. And so in conclusion, gender constancy becomes an important milestone in the development of gender identity because it triggers selective attention to same-sex models. But it also suggests that cognitive factors in the development of who we observe are also in play here. So we're going to be talking now and moving from social learning theory into talking about the elements of social cognition. And as we talked about the other day, those three elements are schema development, attributions, and stereotyping. When we talked about all three of these parts in the cognitive unit, we talked about schemas and how they process information through a variety of interdependent network of these schemas. And so these were individualized mental representations based on past similar experiences. And there are often social and cultural dimensions that influence our schemas. And so these two elements really come into play in the social categorization that we talked about in social identity theory, where we begin to apply stereotypes in attributing behavior. And So you end up seeing someone run a red light and you attribute the behavior not to any valid cause, but to a negative gender stereotype. And so attributions can start to become bad in that way. So it leads us right back into